He was the last person you'd expect to kneel down in a crisp designer suit, wiping tears from a little boy's face during a wedding reception. The child had wandered off, crying alone near the garden fountain, forgotten in the noise and laughter of the crowd. The CEO, known for boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, and an icy reputation, knelt without hesitation and offered comfort, a kind smile, a gentle word, a quiet moment that would change everything. But when the boy's mother arrived, breathless and worried, his entire world stopped, because the woman standing in front of him wasn't just anyone. She was a love he walked away from years ago. And the child? There was something hauntingly familiar in those eyes. What follows is a story of regret, reunion, and a secret that could rewrite their past and future. You don't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for being here. We're so glad you chose to spend your time with us today. If you enjoy deep, emotional stories with powerful twists and real heart, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with someone who loves a good story. We drop new stories like this every single week, so turn on your notifications and stick around. Now let's dive in. This story, it's one you'll feel long after the credits roll. Millionaire CEO comforts crying child at a wedding, stunned when he sees the child's mother. Step away from my son. The words hit him like a physical blow. Ethan Carter, billionaire co-master of boardrooms, man who commanded respect from world leaders, stood frozen as the woman he'd once loved more than life itself stared at him with a mixture of shock and protective fury. Sophia? His voice cracked like a teenager's. The little boy looked between them, confused. Mommy, you know him? And in that moment, everything clicked. The familiar eyes, the way the child had trusted him so easily. The reason this 5-year-old felt like looking into a mirror of his own childhood photos. He's mine, isn't he? Ethan whispered, his billion-dollar empire suddenly, meaning nothing compared to this revelation. Sophia's silence was his answer. Welcome. I bring you the most incredible stories every week. To my incredible subscribers, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support means everything, and today's story is one that will stay with you long after you finish watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button with notifications on and join our storytelling family. Now let's get back to the story. Ethan Carter adjusted his Armani cufflinks for the third time in 10 minutes. The wedding reception swirled around him like a tornado of laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations he had no interest in joining. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. 4:47 p.m. He'd calculated he needed to stay exactly 37 more minutes to fulfill his social obligation to Daniel, his old college roommate. Show face, congratulate the groom, maybe make small talk about quarterly projections with a few fellow CEOs, and escape back to his penthouse where silence was golden and emotions were locked away in a vault he'd built years ago. Ethan, there you are, man. Daniel appeared beside him, slightly tipsy and radiating the kind of happiness that made Ethan's chest tighten with something he refused to name. I can't believe you actually came. Olivia and I were taking bets. I said I would. Ethan's smile was perfectly practiced, the one that had closed million-dollar deals and fooled board members into thinking he was genuinely interested in their weekend golf stories. You know, you should try this thing called fun sometime. It's really catching on. Daniel gestured toward the dance floor where couples swayed to a jazz quartet. There are some beautiful single women here. My cousin, Rebecca, is. I'm good, thanks. Ethan's tone was polite but final. He'd learned years ago that relationships were just another form of business partnership, and he'd had enough failed mergers to know he wasn't built for the long-term contract that came with love. Daniel studied his face with the persistence of someone who'd known him since they were 18 and stupid. You know, college Ethan would have been the first one on that dance floor. What happened to that guy? He got successful. The words came out, sharper than intended. Ethan immediately softened his voice. I'm happy for you. Daniel. Really? But this isn't my scene. It used to be. Before Ethan could respond, Daniel was pulled away by his new bride, leaving him alone with that uncomfortable truth hanging in the air, like smoke from a fire he thought he'd extinguished. The truth was college. Ethan had been a different person, entirely. He'd been the guy who believed in love stories and happy endings, the guy who'd spent entire nights talking about dreams and fears with someone who'd made him believe he could have both success and love. That was before he'd learned that love was a luxury he couldn't afford if he wanted to build an empire. The memory tried to surface, but Ethan pushed it down with the same ruthless efficiency he used to suppress hostile takeovers. He'd become a master at compartmentalizing emotions, filing them away in mental folders labeled irrelevant and counterproductive. He was calculating his exit strategy when he heard it, a sound that cut through the wedding's joyful noise like a blade through silk, a child crying, not the demanding wail of a toddler having a tantrum, but something softer, more heartbreaking, the kind of crying that spoke of genuine distress, not manipulation. Ethan found himself scanning the crowd, his businessman's instinct for problem-solving kicking in, despite himself. There near the garden fountain, partially hidden by a spray of white roses and baby's breath, a little boy sat alone on the stone steps, his small frame shaking with quiet sobs. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, dressed in a tiny black tuxedo that was slightly too big. His bow tie asked, "You?" In his small hands, he clutched a deflated balloon that might have once been red but now hung limp and defeated. Ethan's first instinct was to look for the child's parents. Someone should be handling this, someone whose job it was to comfort crying children and know the right words to say. But as he watched, guest after guest walked by the boy without noticing. They were too caught up in their own conversations, their own joy, their own worlds to see a small person in distress. The boy wiped his nose on his sleeve and looked around with the lost expression of someone who'd been forgotten. Those eyes, dark brown, framed with impossibly long lashes, held a sadness that seemed far too mature for such a young face. Something in Ethan's chest twisted. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself this wasn't his problem. He didn't know anything about children. He built his life specifically to avoid these kinds of messy emotional situations. But the boy's quiet sobbing continued, and Ethan found his feet moving before his brain could object. He approached slowly, the way he might approach a wounded animal, unsure and slightly terrified he'd make things worse. "Hey there," he said, his voice gentler than he'd used in years. He crouched down to the boy's level, his expensive suit forgotten as his knees touched the garden pavement. "You okay, buddy?" The boy looked up at him with those impossibly sad eyes. Up close, Ethan could see the tear tracks on his cheeks, the way his lower lip trembled with the effort of trying to be brave. "My juice fell," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible above the wedding music. And I can't find my mommy." Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. He pulled out his pocket square, silk monogrammed worth more than most people's weekly grocery budget, and gently offered it to the boy. "Here, I've spilled worse things on worse days. Trust me." The boy took the silk square with small, careful fingers. "Thank you, mister. You're nice." "I'm Ethan," he found himself saying. "What's your name?" "Liam." The boy wiped his eyes and looked at Ethan with a trust that was both humbling and terrifying. Are you a prince? You look like a prince. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. No, not a prince. Just someone who knows what it's like to feel lost. Sometimes. The word surprised him. He hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even realized he'd been thinking them. But sitting there with this small, vulnerable person, his usual armor of corporate speak, not just inappropriate, but impossible. Do you know where your mommy might be toward the crowd? Ethan asked. She was talking to the pretty lady in the white dress. But then there were so many people and I got scared and I came here because it's quiet. Ethan nodded, understanding completely. He'd come to the same spot for the same reason, to escape the overwhelming nature of other people's happiness. Well, we'll find her, he said, surprised by his own certainty. But first, how about we get you cleaned up? Can't have you meeting your mom looking like you've been in a fight with a balloon. Liam giggled, the first sound of joy Ethan had heard from him. The balloon didn't fight back very hard. No, they rarely do. Terrible at self-defense, balloons. As Ethan helped Liam straighten his bow tie and smooth down his curly hair, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The simple satisfaction of making someone else's day better without expecting anything in return. There, he said, stepping back to admire his work. Now, you look like the prince. We both look like princes, Liam said solemnly, like we're in the same kingdom. The words hit Ethan harder than they should have. When was the last time he'd felt like he belonged to anything? When had he last felt part of someone else's story rather than the isolated protagonist of his own? Liam, baby, where you? The voice cut through the garden like a prayer, answered, female, breathless, edged with the kind of panic that only a mother's love could produce. Liam, oh God, please. That's my mommy. Liam jumped up, his face lighting up with pure joy. Mommy, I'm here. Ethan stood slowly, brushing off his knees, preparing to meet another grateful parent and accept their thanks before disappearing back into his carefully constructed solitude. But as the figure emerged from behind the rose bushes, as the voice became a face, as recognition hit him like a physical blow, the world stopped. Sophia Lane stood frozen in the garden path, her eyes wide with disbelief. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, her dark hair now shorter, framing her face in a way that emphasized the high cheekbones and full lips that had haunted his dreams for 5 years. She wore a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. And her hands, those hands that had once traced his face in the darkness of their shared apartment, were trembling. Ethan, the word came out as barely a whisper. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman who had once been his entire world, the woman who had walked out of his life without explanation, taking his heart with her. Mommy, this is my friend. Ethan. Liam ran to his mother, wrapping his small arms around her legs. He helped me when I was sad, and he gave me his fancy napkin, and he said, we look like princes. Sophia's eyes never left Ethan's face. He could see the storm of emotions there, shock, fear, something that might have been longing quickly, buried under protective instinct. Liam, honey, go sit on the bench for a minute, okay? Mommy needs to talk to Ethan. But please, baby, just for a minute. Liam, sensing the tension in the air with the intuition children possess, nodded and skipped over to a nearby garden bench, still clutching Ethan's monogram. Pocket square. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. 5 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of dreams that had died in the space between one day and the next. You look good, Sophia said finally, her voice carefully neutral. Success suits you. Don't. The word came out harsher than he intended. Don't do that. Don't. Pretend this is just normal. What do you want me to say, Ethan? That seeing you here feels like being hit by lightning that I've spent 5 years trying to forget. You existed. You did a good job of it. Just disappeared. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. Sophia's composure cracked slightly. I left because I had to. Had to or wanted to. Had to, she repeated firmly. You were never going to choose me over your empire. We both knew that. That's not, isn't it? Her voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself glancing toward Liam to make sure he wasn't listening. How many dinners did you miss? How many conversations did you cut short for a phone call? How many times did you promise to be present and then disappear into your office? The accusations hit their mark because they were true. Every single one of them. I was building something, he said quietly, for us, for our future. You were building a wall, she countered, between you and everyone who tried to love you. They stared at each other across the garden, the weight of their shared history making the air thick and difficult to breathe. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan's voice was barely audible. Tell you what? But even as she asked, they both knew what he meant, because now looking at Liam, really looking at him, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same stubborn chin, the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. He's mine, isn't he? The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Sophia's silence was answer enough. How long have you known? She asked finally. Since the moment I saw his eyes, they're my eyes. Sophia, my father's eyes. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion he couldn't hide. 5 years. You kept him from me for 5 years. I kept him safe. From what? From me? From the man you were becoming. The man who valued profit margins over people. The man who couldn't see past his own ambition to notice the woman who loved him was drowning. The truth was hitting them both like a tidal wave. Can you imagine discovering your father like this? Let me know in the comments what you think you would do in Ethan's situation. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You didn't give me a choice. You had already made your choice, Ethan. Every day, every missed dinner, every time you chose work over me, you were choosing. I just finally accepted what you were choosing. That's not fair. Fair. Sophia's voice rose. Again, you want to talk about fair? I spent 2 years watching you disappear into your company. 2 years trying to reach a man who was becoming a stranger. And when I finally realized I was pregnant, I had to face the reality that you were never going to be the father this child needed. You don't know that. Ethan closed his eyes, remembering those last months had been a blur of acquisition deals and merger negotiations. He'd been so close to the breakthrough that would establish his company as a major player. So close to proving that the kid from a broken home could build something that mattered. Don't I? When was the last time you spent a full day without checking your phone? When was the last time you had a conversation that wasn't about business? When was the last time you let yourself be vulnerable with another human being? The questions hit him like physical blows because he couldn't answer them. Because the truth was he'd forgotten how to be human somewhere along the way to becoming successful. I could have learned, he said quietly. I could have tried. Could you? Her voice was gentler now, but no less devastating, because the Ethan I fell in love with was already disappearing. The Ethan who used to read poetry to me, who used to dream about traveling the world, who used to believe that love was more important than money. Where was he those last four? Their future? But somewhere along the way, the future had become more important than the present. The goal had become more important than the journey. I was scared, he admitted, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. Scared of failing, scared of not being enough. You were enough, Sophia said softly. You were more than enough, but you couldn't see it. Mommy, Liam's voice interrupted them. Are you sad? Sophia wiped her eyes quickly. No, baby, just remembering something. Liam hopped off the bench and walked over to them, his small hand slipping into Ethan's, with a trust that made Ethan's chest tight. Mr. Ethan, do you want to come eat cake with us? The cake is really big, and it has flowers on it. Ethan looked down at the boy, his son, and felt something shift inside him, something that had been locked away for so long. He'd forgotten it existed. He looked at Sophia, searching her face for permission, for hope, for anything that might suggest this nightmare could become something else. Please, Liam squeezed his hand. I like you. You're nice to me. The simple words broke something inside Ethan. When was the last time someone had liked him just for being kind? When was the last time someone had wanted his company for no other reason than they enjoyed being with him? Sophia, he said quietly, I know I don't have a right to ask for anything. I know I made choices that hurt you, but please let me try. Not as the CEO, not as the man who built an empire, but as his father, as someone who wants to do better. Sophia studied his face, and for a moment Ethan saw a flicker of the woman who had once believed in him, the woman who had seen potential in him that he'd forgotten existed. You hurt me, she said. Finally, you hurt me more than I thought it was possible to be hurt. I know, and I won't let you hurt him. I know. If you do this, if you want to be part of his life, it can't be halfway. It can't be when it's convenient for you or when it fits into your schedule. It has to be real. Ethan knelt down so he was at eye level with Liam. Hey, buddy, would you like it if I came around? Sometimes, maybe we could play together, or read stories, or just talk. Liam's face lit up like sunrise. Yes. Can we play pirates? I have a really good sword at home. I don't know much about being a pirate, Ethan admitted, but I'd like to learn. I can teach you, Liam said. Seriously, it's not too hard. You just have to say ahoy a lot and pretend you have a beard. For the first time in 5 years, Ethan laughed. Really laughed. The sound surprised him. Rusty and genuine and completely uncontrolled. Ahoy, Captain Liam, he said solemnly. Ahoy, Mr. Ethan. Sophia watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. And when Ethan looked up at her, he saw something he hadn't dared hope for. Forgiveness. Not complete, not unconditional, but a beginning. The cake really is good, she said quietly, and he's been talking about it for the last 20 minutes. Then we should probably go have some cake, Ethan said, standing up but keeping hold of Liam's hand. Before Captain Liam here makes us walk the plank. As they walked back toward the reception, Liam chattering excitedly about pirates and cake and whether Ethan knew any good pirate songs. Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The wedding reception had continued around them, but as Ethan sat at a small table with Sophia and Liam sharing a slice of vanilla cake, that was probably the best thing he'd tasted in years. He realized that everything had changed, not just the situation, though discovering he was a father was certainly life-altering, but him, Something inside him that had been frozen for years was starting to thaw. "Mr. Ethan," Liam said, his mouth full of frosting, "do you have a little boy?" The question was innocent, but it hit Ethan like a physical blow. I didn't know I did, but it looks like I do now. Is it me?" Liam's eyes were wide with hope. Ethan looked at Sophia, who nodded slightly. "Yeah, buddy, it's you. So you're my daddy?" The word daddy nearly undid him. He'd been called a lot of things. So, sir, Mr. Blake, even ruthless bastard in a few particularly. Heated board meetings, but never daddy. "Yes, I'm your daddy." Liam launched himself from his chair and into Ethan's arms with the abandon that only children possess. "I always wanted a daddy. Mommy said maybe someday I'd meet you, but I didn't know you'd be so nice." Over Liam's head, Ethan met Sophia's eyes. She was crying now openly, and he could see the years of struggle there, the loneliness of single motherhood, the weight of protecting her child from disappointment, the exhaustion of being everything to someone who deserved the world. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her. "I'm so sorry." "I know," she whispered back. "I can see it in your eyes. You're different. The same, but different. Like you remembered who you used to be. And that was it. Exactly. Sitting there with his son in his arms and the woman he'd never stopped loving across from him. Ethan felt like he was remembering himself, the man he'd been before fear and ambition had built walls around his heart, the man who'd once believed that love was the most important thing in the world. "Dance with me," Liam said. Suddenly, "I don't think I know how to dance with a 5-year-old, Ethan admitted. "I'll show you. You just put me on your shoulders and spin around." Before Ethan could object, Liam was climbing onto his shoulders with the fearlessness of youth. And suddenly, Ethan was spinning on the dance floor of his college, friends' wedding, his son laughing with pure joy above him, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this happy. He caught glimpses of the other wedding guests watching them, some with confusion, others with delight. Daniel appeared beside him at one point, his face split by a grin. "Now, this is the Ethan I remember," Daniel said. "Who's the little guy?" "This is my son," Ethan said, the words feeling surreal but right. "Liam, your son?" "Ethan, you never said." "I just found out." Daniel, eyes widened, but before he could ask more questions, Liam was demanding to be spun again, and Ethan was happy to oblige. For the next hour, he did things he'd never imagined doing. He played peekaboo with a 5-year-old. He listened to endless stories about pirates and superheroes, and the neighbor's cat who might be magic. He answered questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether rich people had to eat vegetables. And through it all, he felt the ice around his heart continuing to melt. "You're good with him," Sophia said during a quiet moment while Liam was off, showing his new friend the wedding cake's elaborate decorations. "I don't know what I'm doing," Ethan admitted. "I don't know the first thing about being a father. None of us do at first, but you're patient with him. You listen to him. You treat him like a person, not just a small inconvenience. He's incredible. How did you do this alone?" Sophia's smile was tired but proud. "You do what you have to do. You love them so much that everything else becomes background noise. I want to help. I want to be part of this. I know, and I want to believe you. But Ethan, this isn't a business deal. You can't just decide to be a father when it's convenient and then disappear when work gets busy. The man I knew 5 years ago would have already checked his phone 3 times and made 2 business calls." Ethan realized at the start that she was right. His phone had been buzzing in his pocket for the last hour, and he hadn't even thought about checking it. There were probably emails from Tokyo, calls from investors, updates on the European markets, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't care. My phone is in my pocket, he said quietly. It's been ringing for an hour. I haven't looked at it once. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. Are you feeling okay? I'm feeling different, like I've been walking around, half alive for years and didn't even know it. That's what love does, she said, softly. It makes you more yourself than you ever thought possible. I loved you, he said suddenly. I want you to know that I loved you so much it terrified me. I know I loved you too, but love isn't enough if you can't be present for it. I'm here now for today. But what about tomorrow? What about next week, when you have a board meeting and a conference call with investors and a presentation to the Tokyo office? Ethan thought about his calendar packed with meetings that had seemed crucial this morning, but now felt like elaborate games played by people who had forgotten what actually mattered. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know how to balance it all, but I know I want to try. I know that sitting here with you and Liam is the most important thing I've done in years. Mommy, Daddy, come see. Liam's voice interrupted them. The cake has lights in it. Daddy, the word hit Ethan like a revelation every time. They walked over to where Liam was pointing excitedly at the wedding cake sparkler. Candles in the fading evening light. The tiny sparks looked like stars. It's magic, Liam whispered. Seriously, real magic. You know what? Ethan said, lifting Liam up so he could see better. I think you're right. And as he stood there, his son in his arms, Sophia beside him, watching fireworks dance on a wedding cake, Ethan thought that maybe Liam was more right than he knew. Maybe this was magic, the kind that transformed cold, ambitious men into fathers, the kind that took broken hearts and made them whole again, the kind that reminded you that all the success in the world meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. I love you, Daddy, Liam said sleepily, his head resting on Ethan's shoulder. I love you, too, son, Ethan replied, the words feeling like the most important business deal he'd ever closed. Over Liam's head, he met Sophia's eyes. She was crying again, but this time he thought they might be happy tears. We have a lot to figure out, she said quietly. We do. It's going to be complicated, probably. You're going to have to change. Really, change. I know, and I'm going to have to learn to trust you again. I'll learn it, he said simply, however long it takes. She studied his face in the twilight, and he could see her weighing his words, measuring them against years of disappointment and broken promises. Okay, she said. Finally, we can try. And that's how a wedding that Ethan Blake almost skipped became the most important day of his life. Sometimes the moments that change everything come when we least expect them, disguised as ordinary encounters with extraordinary people. As the evening wound down and the wedding guests began to disperse, Ethan found himself reluctant to leave. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's meetings or next quarter's projections. He was thinking about bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes and teaching his son how to ride a bike. We should probably get going, Sophia said as Liam dozed against Ethan's shoulder. Someone has school tomorrow. Can I see you? Again, both of you? You can call me, she said, pulling out her phone. We can start slow. Maybe coffee sometime this week. I'd like that. As they exchanged numbers, Ethan felt like he was negotiating the most important contract of his life, not because of the legal implications or the financial stakes, but because everything that mattered was hanging in the balance. Ethan, Sophia's voice was soft as they walked toward the parking lot. What you did tonight, the way you were with Liam, that's the man I fell in love with. I'd forgotten he existed. So had I, Ethan admitted. But I remember now. Good, because that's the only man I want around my son. Our son, Ethan corrected gently. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all evening. Our son, as he watched them drive away, Liam's small hand waving from the back window. Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not the calculating hope of a businessman who'd identified a profitable opportunity, but the pure, terrifying hope of a man who'd been given a second chance at the only thing that really mattered. His phone buzzed with another ignored call, another urgent email, another crisis that couldn't wait until tomorrow. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Carter turned off his phone and went home to think about the future he actually wanted to build. The next morning, he would wake up and make the first of many changes. He would delegate more, trust his team more, and remember that a company was just a collection of people working together, not a monument to his own ambition. He would learn to say no to meetings that didn't matter and yes to moments that did. He would discover that being a father wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. And he would find that the most successful day of his life wasn't the day he made his first million or his first billion or the day he was featured on the cover of Forbes. It was the day he learned that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as ordinary moments, a crying child, a chance encounter, a conversation that changes everything. Because in the end, success isn't measured by what you build. It's measured by what you become. And Ethan Carter was finally becoming the man he was always meant to be. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that it's never too late to choose love over ambition, presence over productivity, and people over profit. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective. Remember, the most important moments in your life might be waiting for you in the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the magic of second chances.